This
on different
conference will now
companies.
be recorded.
We can start. Thank you.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, so we will start with the session. So let me just introduce you to Tech Canvas. So Tech Canvas is an IT certifications training organization where we help professionals to pursue their certification exams, and we train them for that. So we are authorized training center for IIBA and PMI. So we provide training regarding all the IIBA certifications that includes ECBA, CBAP, CCBA, Agile, and we also provide project management certifications training for PMP and CAPM. We also have domain courses into banking, finance, healthcare, and many more. So today's topic is very interesting. It is Agile methodology and role of Agile BA, and we have with us Ipshita, who is a Scrum Alliance CSPO certified professional with over 13 years of experience in mapping business analysis, business requirements, and project management. She has expertise in leading multiple projects and managing the development teams through the development lifecycle using agile methodologies. So welcome, Ipshita, and I request you to take this session ahead. Also, one more request to everybody, please do not turn on your video cams. And if you'll have any question, you can either unmute or you can put it on the chat and we can take it in the end. So depends upon how Ipshita would want to go with the questions. So yeah, over to you, Ipshita.
Right. Thanks for the wonderful introduction, Soumya. So yeah, welcome all for today's webinar. And as you know, the topic is Agile methodology and role of Agile BA. So what we will do is I'll just finish off the slides and whatever content I have to share today. And then probably we can take up the question answers at the end. And in the meantime, if you want, you can just add it in the chat box as well. So that once I'm done with the slide deck, then I can just go through the questions and clarify the doubts and everything. Right. So as the topic says, it's agile methodology. So, you guys must be aware of, these days this word agile methodology is very much in the software industry. Many companies are trying to move into the agile mode of working because that has a lot of advantages compared to the other technologies or the other methodologies that we had been using so far. So that's the reason. And of course, when we talk about agile, every company, so of course we do have a process, we do have some set of guidelines which agile does suggest. But since agile is a very flexible kind of a methodology, it doesn't impose anything, it doesn't actually mandate that we need to follow things to work in an agile way. Everything is quite flexible in agile, and that is one of the reasons that every company who basically adopts agile methodology as a way of software development, they are trying to get into their own definition which basically works for the team. So every team is different, every company or organization is different. So it's like the agile concepts that we will be covering are basically a very high level concepts, and when you try to implement into your projects, you do pick and choose and analyze what works for you and then probably implement that particular concept. So that's how it is. Now, before we get into the agile way of working, one very important thing is the agile mindset. We need to understand what agile mindset is, and this is very important because each and every team member has to adopt to that agile mindset, because we just cannot blindly say that okay, we are agile and then we have a very rigid mindset. In that case, on a true sense, the team can never be an agile team. So a couple of things that is or pointers which might help us to understand what an agile mindset is like you need to view your setbacks as learning opportunities. So of course some things do work, some things do not work. So if you're not able to fix a particular bug in the way probably you would want to, or if there are any technological constraint on the existing technology that you're using, so just do not is my audio clear? Just to check.
Yeah.
Okay,
Please
okay,
go
because
ahead.
I
Yes, it
just
is
got a
clear.
pop-up on my screen, so I was just a little worried. Yeah. So it's like, you don't be upset with it that, okay, it's not working, and then, the typical hierarchy which is there in the company, probably they start pressurizing you that, okay, you're not able to do it. So these things shouldn't be there in an agile, in an agile team. So it's like you have made failure, it's okay. You just take it as a learning and just move on. That's how your mindset should be for each and every team member in an agile team. The next point is, you embrace iterations, collaborations, and changes. So agile is mainly about iteration. So when we talk about agile, it's like we don't do a big bang release as we used to do in waterfall. So probably, we used to spend, in case of waterfall, we used to spend a good 3-4 months doing a requirement gathering, then spend good 6-9 months in doing, the development, and then eventually do a big bang release. So what happens is, by the time you basically uh, release your particular product, probably the requirement has completely changed because of the changes, a very dynamic change in the market condition that goes on. So those were a lot of disadvantages which were there in waterfall. And when agile came into the picture, agile always promotes that you do small incremental releases, you build things in iteration, you push it to live, you get feedback from your end users, and then you again do incremental release. So that's how it should be. So it's more about, rather than doing a big bang release, you are doing small iterations, releasing it, getting feedback. So it's a lot of collaboration, a lot of feedback, and a lot of changes that, it has to be. So when you, each as an individual, start working in an agile team, you need to have that mindset. Like, things will change, you have to have a lot of collaborative mindset. So these things have to be, you need to be open to accept such things. The third point is, you need to focus on delivering value. So you need to just come out with the deadlines that, probably we used to follow. So the main focus in agile team is what value add probably you are giving your end user. So it's just not, as a business analyst, just don't think of requirements what have been given to you, but also think that how these requirements are going to add value. And for that, if you think that, modifying those or tweaking them will give you a better value add to the end user, you should always suggest that. So the focus is always the values that you're delivering. So it's a value driven kind of a mindset what is needed. And of course, you need to respect each and every team member, because the hierarchical concept in agile says that, there shouldn't be any hierarchy in the team. So everybody in the development team are treated as equals, and you need to respect each and everyone's thought process. And of course, it's a collaborative effort. So when we say that in agile, we are usually doing this iteration mode. So suppose there's a team of 5, right, and your iteration is of 2 weeks iteration. So if I have finished the work that I had been doing, and I know that, okay, probably my teammate is stuck on something, or he or she needs some help, so I just go up and, help him or her. So it's a very collaborative kind of a thing. I shouldn't wait for somebody to come and approach me, rather I just, initiate and just go and help them out. So that's how it should be. And eventually it's a continual improvement and learning. So each and every team member in the development team, they're continuously upgrading themselves, be it in terms of technology, be it in terms of better domain knowledge and everything. So it's a continuous uh, improvement and continuous learning, of course, learning in new methodologies as well. So when you have, followed a certain way of probably, the agile team that is working, they have actually followed a couple of processes maybe in the first sprint, and then some of them, the team realized that, oh, this is not working well, probably it's just a waste of time, can we change it, or can we do something else? So it suggests for improvements also. So those things are also uh, has to be considered when we talk about an agile mindset. And autonomy, so it's like the agile team, again, when we talk about, it's a self-governing team, and it's like the team empowerment does matter. So the team themselves are quite efficient enough to manage themselves, pick up the work, and ensure that the work is delivered. That's how it should be. And of course, the focus is always to deliver quality to the customers, because that's what the intention is. So customers here what they mean is the end users who will be using the end product. And acceptance and adaptation to change, because in agile, one thing which is very clearly said, and of course, as the name suggests, this is agile, your requirements are never freezed. Things can change any moment. So you need to have that mindset that, okay, probably what we are doing now, that can change, that can be, tweaked, or that can be scrapped off completely. And you need to have that open mindset to accept that change as well. And ability to convert failures into opportunities. So that is something which you need to take it very positively. So the failures that you see, take it up as a learning. So something which aligns with the first point here as well. So, take it as a new opportunity or a new learning and move on. So having that mindset in each and every individual is very important. And unless that happens, probably a team can never be called as an agile team in a true sense. Now we basically get into what agile is. So as I said, that in agile we basically look for, or we basically doing work in increments or in iterations, right? So one very important thing in agile is the product backlog. So product backlog is basically the repository of requirements wherein you have your user story. So we will actually see what user stories are and how they're written, but you usually have the defects, you have your technical depths, you have user stories. So all the requirements are added into the product backlog, and that is your one single repository. The items are pulled from the top of the product backlog, and this product backlog, as you see, is basically prioritized, detailed down by the product owner. So the backlog is always in the prioritized order. So the items from the top of the backlog are pulled, right? So then of course the designing is done, the solutioning is defined, then it gets into the building mode. Basically the development happens, and then eventually it is the testing, so the acceptance testing happens. So what in agile, how it happens is like, you can take feedback from your business stakeholders as well, you can demonstrate the work to them, and if it is passed, so if the acceptance testing is cleared, if everyone agrees to it, then you push it on to the, or you mark it for the release. It can go ahead and the story can be released, or the work item can be released. If not, if it is failed, then again it follows the same process for the next iteration. So again, so it's a very circular or a very systematic way. So you pick it up, you do your analysis, you define the solution, you build it, you test it, and then again you push it on if it is accepted. So that's how it basically works in agile. And in this process, where exactly the business analysts come into the picture is what we will see here. So the prioritized backlog items for the next iteration. So basically, since your product owner has already prioritized the backlog, so the business analyst can pull in the items from the product backlog and probably detail them down in terms of requirements. And at times the business analyst also starts collaborating with the business stakeholders and the product owners, and uh, discuss and get more information into the stories as well. So the more the collaboration of the agile business analyst is more with the product owner, and then trying to understand the requirement, trying to understand the value add, and eventually coming up with more and more details in the story. And the agile business analyst can also at times basically participate in the acceptance testing as well. So the stories can also be accepted by the agile business analyst on behalf of a product owner if needed. So that's something that they would play a role. And of course the business analyst also does the acceptance testing along with the testing team if needed. So they also provide a lot of support for the testing as well. So I guess that is not only in agile but in normal methodology as well, a business analyst does provide support in testing. So that's how it is. And these are basically the areas wherein a business analyst pitches in. Now if you see, again just going back here, so if you see here, in agile concept, the business analyst is always a part of, the complete process. Again, if I compare it with the waterfall, probably 10 years back, in that case, a business analyst were only involved during the first 3 months or 2 months of the requirement gathering phase. And then once the functional requirements are all documented, the business requirements are documented and signed off, they would pass that to the technical team, and then probably the business analyst interference is not there anymore till the UAT used to happen, right? So then there used to be a huge gap when, in the interference or the work for the business analyst for any project. Unlike in agile, so you get to see that there's always a the interference, or that or the presence of a business analyst is always in each and every phase. So the business analyst is also quite close to the team. They also know who the team members are, who are working on what user story, and that's the reason the bonding also is quite good, and it helps in delivery as well. Now, as I was telling, so agile has a lot of flavors. Now, when we talk about agile, it is not only Scrum. Agile has different processes. So when you pick up agile, you can do a Scrum, you can do Kanban, there is extreme programming, there are different techniques within agile umbrella itself, amongst which Scrum is the very popular one. And we will, in today's session, we will basically try and understand the Scrum process. But just bear in mind, there are other processes as well. Scrum is not the only one. Okay? Right. Now, what happens in Scrum is usually, as I said, it's, again, we are focusing on the iteration. So as we've seen that we have the product backlog, which is being owned by the product owner. Then there is a sprint planning that happens. So the iteration process in Scrum is usually called as sprint, and sprints are like, the sprint durations are usually 2 to 4 weeks, depends on the organization and depends on the team, of course, but recommended it is like, usually people do follow 2 week sprint, but it is completely dependent on what kind of projects you're dealing with. So what happens is the first day of that 2 week sprint is something called as a sprint planning, wherein the product owner, the business analyst, and your entire team is present, and the stories are explained, the requirements are explained to them, right? And then probably, and since I said that the product backlog is always prioritized, now based on the number of team members that you have, the Scrum Master would calculate the velocity of the sprint, and then they would pick up, suppose if I have 5 team members, probably I'll not pick up more than 3 to 4 stories, depending on how what my team is able to deliver within the 2 weeks. So those stories, those 3 to 4 stories are detailedly discussed, and then if there are any questions, clarifications, all those things are cleared by the business analyst or the product owner, and then your sprint backlog is formed, and that 2 week sprint cycle begins. Of course, we always have the Scrum Master facilitating these meetings to ensure that no impediments are faced and everything goes smoothly within those 2 weeks, because we don't want any loss of time, because everything is calculated and you have very limited time of 2 weeks to deliver certain requirements. Now, then you directly get into, once your sprint backlog is all finalized, you directly get into your sprint zone, wherein you do the designing, the development, and the testing. So that's a continuous cycle that goes on. Along with that, side by side, every day we have something called as a daily Scrum. Now, what happens in a daily Scrum? Again, this is something which is facilitated by the Scrum Master, wherein the entire team is present. The product owner, the business analyst, if any stakeholders needs to be present, they also can join, where the team basically updates. So what they have done yesterday, what they are going to do today, and if there are any impediments, the team members would highlight them. And then probably if those impediments are something that the Scrum Master can deal with, or some, if they are facing some technical challenges, some other team members can help them out. So it is very important for the team to do the daily Scrum when they are doing the Scrum process, because it gives a lot of transparency. And one of the things in the agile mindset that you've seen, it's a lot of collaboration needs to happen. So this is also a platform for you to collaborate, the daily Scrum meetings. And it of course gives a lot of transparency to everyone regarding what is the progress, how much the work has been done, etc. And once probably you are towards the end of your 2-week sprint cycle, the last day, we have another ceremony or a sprint, scrum event called as the sprint review. So again, each and every team members in that particular scrum event would basically, in the sprint review, would basically demonstrate the user stories that or the requirements that they have worked upon, and eventually take feedback from the product owner, from the business stakeholders, and if the stories are accepted, they are tagged for the product increment release. If not, then again the same cycle would continue. And next there is last but not the least, the event or the scrum event is the retrospective event, which is basically for the team members to retrospect, like, you know, the 2 weeks of sprint that they have just finished, are there any improvements that they can do, right? What went well in that sprint, what did not go well. So it is a platform for the team members to basically look for continuous improvement and new learnings for them. So this is on a very overall view of what a scrum process is. And of course, side by side, if you see here, there is a little burn down chart. So this is something for the scrum master basically to track, like, you know, how much work has been completed. So we have the days in the y-axis and tasks in the x-axis, just to ensure that, you know, how much of tasks that has been committed are being done on a day-to-day basis. So that is a very high level overview of the scrum process, which is very popular in Agile. Now, next we will be talking about user. Yeah.
I have a question. Can I ask?
Yes, please.
In Scrum. Yeah. So actually, in Agile methodology, so business analysts have to prepare only user stories, right? I mean the document.
Yes. So,
but
user story
acceptance
is
criteria.
one of the artifacts. Yeah.
Yeah. So acceptance criteria he will prepare while after creating user stories, or when business analyst will create the acceptance criteria document.
Acceptance criteria is within the user story itself. So it is a part of your user story. So we'll get into here. So the typical way how you write a user story is this. So you have a structure, right? And the way you write is you're always focused on the user. So as a user, now that user is basically the end user. So if you're probably doing a student portal, so as a student, I want to perform some tasks so that I want to achieve. So the benefits also needs to be highlighted. Then if you want, you can have the description just for the benefit of your development team to understand what is going to happen. And next is the acceptance criteria that is a part of the user story itself, which defines the, you know, the correctness of implementation. So you can then add your acceptance criteria in the user story itself as a couple of points, wherein you talk about what, you know, is going to, like, if it is a login screen, a very simple example I'm giving. If it is a login screen, then the acceptance criteria should be like, okay, if I add an incorrect password, I would see an error. Or, you know, if I add a incorrect username, I would see an error. So similarly, there can be a lot of acceptance criteria which are just guiding your testing team to understand, okay, like these are the failure or these are the points of passing that particular user story. Now, every team again have different ways of writing acceptance criteria. Some team members or some companies or teams, they prefer writing at, you know, different point wise. Again, some teams also do in a very different way, which is a behavioral driven approach, the BDD format, wherein they would write that acceptance criteria as given, when, then. So that's a different way of writing. So depends on what your team is comfortable to understand. You can pick and choose the way of writing acceptance criteria and form it. Does this answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. And I have one more question. So, is there any documents required in Agile methodology other than user stories and acceptance criteria, or only this documentation it is required for? Yeah.
So one more thing just to correct here. So Agile doesn't actually asks you to create any documentation, right? So you do not create any documentation in Agile. The best thing, if you're following an Agile methodology writing, we usually write user story or prefer to write user story in any of the tools which are available. The most commonly used tool is Jira. that people use in Agile, but there are other tools also available, which is TFS, Rally, etc., etc. But usually acceptance criteria, like these are the only thing. And of course, now if your team needs that, okay, if it is a UI centric project, right, so you might want to help your team with some wireframes and help them out. So those things you can always help them by creating wireframes, by creating mock-ups. So those things are there, but it is not that Agile is forcing you to do it. It's just like, it's Agile is a very open concept, so whatever your team is comfortable with, you can do it. So that's how it is. So if my team wants me as a business analyst to create wireframes, to create mockups, I would actually have to do that as well. And keep your
Got
user
it.
stories as small as possible. Don't make it too elaborate. And of course, it's like it confuses people, because your aim is that story needs to be finished in 2 weeks of time, and your 2 weeks includes development and testing as well, right? And these days, of course, people do a lot of when you talk about development technology wise, we are also as best practices, we are also doing automation, unit test automation and stuff like that. So everything has to be completed within your 2 weeks time frame. So make the user stories as small as possible, break them down into independent user stories so that no two user stories are dependent on each other. And your main intention as a BA while you're writing the user story is to ensure that it has to be completed in the 2 weeks of time frame. So small independent user stories is what is the best way of writing it, and that helps the team, of course. Right. So now, how we basically form it, of course. So we have themes, then we create epic. So when you basically start off a project, right, at that time your user stories are not yet created. So how you think of it? So first, probably you create a theme, then you have different epics to it, and then you have user stories. And within user stories, you can break down into smaller technical tasks if needed. So that's how your breakdown or that hierarchy should be, so that either within one epic you know that, okay, there are 5 user stories. So for example, if it is a e-commerce shopping app, right, so the payment integration can be one epic, and within that there can be many user stories into it, because that is a one big chunk of it, right? So accordingly, you have to logically break that particular theme into different epics. Epics can be quite big, but within that epic there has to be smaller user stories which are doable. And epics basically helps you, because as you can later on track how much has been completed, and you can also decide on the different releases that you want to do. So the logical decision making becomes helpful if you have broken that complete project into a very high level structure like this. Right. Now, very simple and a typical thing of waterfall versus agile. So as you know, as the name suggests, waterfall. So it's always been, you finish one step, then you move to the other. So you have done the conception, the initiation, then you do the analysis, then you do the design, construction, testing, and development. So everything goes at one go altogether. Unlike in agile, wherein I said, so it's like, I pick up, I know I have to take 5 stories in the sprint. So when the sprint 1 is going on, right, for the 5 stories, the business analyst is actually free to basically work on the next set of stories that would be picked up in my sprint 2. So that conception, initiation, as analysis actually goes on, even though the development of the previous stories are going. So it's like, it's a very cyclic kind of a process in agile, and which is actually quite helpful. Now, typically a definition given by IIB in terms of an agile business analyst is about increasing the delivery of business value to the stakeholders of project or the products being developed. So the main idea is like, as a business analyst, you do whatever is possible for you to help your stakeholders executing the project, or if it's a product company, developing the best product which is helping the end customers. So probably for that you might have to step out of your shoes as well, but then that's absolutely fine, because a business analyst doesn't have a very hard and fast, well-defined role that you have to follow 5 checklists to check. It is like, it's quite a very subjective kind of a role, wherein your main aim is a value delivery. That's it. So for that, you need to do anything that helps your team, that is helping the project or the product. Now we'll just quickly go through the scope of business analysis. So again, this is the scope of business analysis that I'm sharing. Again, it is not specific to Agile. It can be for any waterfall or any other methodologies as well. But that is how usually it happens. So when we basically start our career as a business analyst, right? So what we do is, probably we've been given one project to deal with. So this is one project that wherein we are doing the requirements, we are doing the analysis, we are probably creating a lot of documentations as well. So our mindset or our focus as a BA is completely confined into that one project that I have been assigned to. And that is my usually probably first 5 years of your career as a business analyst, you would do it 3 to 5 years. The next bit, when you are growing up your ladder a little bit, is where you think on different process improvements. You think, okay, can I introduce this process into the the working culture? Will that help my team? Can I have that process? So you actually have that very open mindset wherein you think of probably redesigning something, wherein you're coming up with your thoughts and your suggestions. So if there is an existing project that's going on, probably you come up with your improvement list and present it to your customer or your stakeholders, right? So sort of redesigning or sort of different way of upgrading a new technology. So you can come up, so your mindset does matures from a system improvement to a process improvement. And you can also suggest process improvements within your team as well, within your organization as well. So that probably is the next career growth, whether probably you become a senior BA or you think from a very high level angle. You are above the typical project feature requirements and you think from a little above it. And the next bit is the enterprise improvement, wherein you're thinking for the organization that you're working for. You're doing a SWOT analysis, you're doing the customer and competitor analysis for the different competitors which are there. You're trying to understand value proposition. You're basically trying to bring business for your organization, right? So typically the pre-sales work that we do. So these are the different levels of based on a BA seniority, how it should grow. And this probably will just help you to to understand where your growth needs to go into based on the different levels. So how, as a business analyst is growing, how it affects the organization is also important, because the y-axis, if you see, is the organizational impact. So once you think of an enterprise improvement, of course that's the peak, that's the topmost way of contributing, right? Next, again, from an agile perspective, the typical ways, right? So it's the 7 guiding principles which we always call for an agile BA. So the first one is think as a customer. So when I say think as a customer, it is not like you need to think as the end user who is using the product, not as a customer or a client for whom you're working, but as an end user for whom you're working. So that's what you need to think on those angles, right? So you need to actually imbibe these principles while you are writing your user stories, while you're talking to your stakeholders, your product owners. So you need to have that mindset on. Next bit is analyze to determine what is valuable. So understand what is valuable. So probably your business stakeholder can come up and say, okay, I want you to do this, but then understand why they are wanting it, what value add probably it's going to give them. And then if you have a better suggestion, you can always go ahead and suggest. So have that open mind. So to analyze it is very important. Next is get real using examples. So when you are basically explaining something, explaining a concept or explaining a typical feature to the team or your business stakeholders, it is always important that if you can relate it with some real life examples, because this is a human tendency. So anytime, like any normal human being, whenever we try to explain things with examples, we easily understand those things. So get real using examples is something which will help your team to understand while you're explaining probably the requirements, and it will definitely help your business stakeholders as well while you're trying to explain your thought process towards a certain feature maybe. The next one is avoid waste. So anything which you think is not working, for example, writing pages of documentation, which can be avoided, because eventually those do, become waste of time, because you probably write big documents on requirements, and then since it is agile, that requirement can easily change. So probably when you're giving your review, your sprint demo, you get a feedback for which you might have to change that requirement, but nobody actually takes that effort to come up and update that document which was initially created. So eventually the piles of documents which we create, those eventually becomes dead documents. So as a team, if you think it's not required, that can easily be avoided. So look for things which can be avoided and which are just, taking a lot of time but are not helping. So that is one. Next is understand what is doable. So of course, as a business analyst, you are basically the bridging factor. You know your team very well. You know the strengths and weaknesses of your development team. You understand your business stakeholders also, and you know what their requirements are. So you know what value add can be provided uh, for your business stakeholders. So understanding what is doable is very important. The next thing also, one more thing here, like for an example, so if suppose my business stakeholders wants me to create a app, so I have a shopping website already, probably an online shopping. Now they've asked me to create a mobile app because that's the requirement, but I understand my team. I know I do not have that expertise. I do not have an Android developer or iOS developer in my team, so I do understand what is doable. So what I do as a business analyst, I suggest another workaround. Probably I would ask my stakeholders that, okay, instead of going with an app development, why don't we go with a progressive web app, which gives you the same look and feel of a mobile, but it is like done in web, for which I do not need a separate a specific set of developers for it. Anybody in the team should be able to do it with the current technological knowledge that they have. And of course, it suffices the need of my business stakeholders also, because it gives a look and feel of exactly of a mobile app. So, these suggestions are something which is expected out of you as an agile BA. So understanding what is doable and then taking the right moves. Okay, and the next part here is simulate collaboration and continuous improvement. So of course, you are trying to collaborate with your stakeholders and of course with the team members as well, and looking for continuous improvement. So what better as a team we can do, what better I can suggest so that the improvement is there, not only for you, but for everybody in the team. And last but not the least, see the whole. So this is something which is very important, because as a business analyst, I need to see the whole picture. I need to understand what what the business is all about. So if it is an e-commerce portal that I'm working for, that the project is for, I need to understand the business model for that as well, because only then you will be able to provide all the all the other principles will come into the picture. Unless you understand the whole business model or the whole domain, you will not be able to give the suggestions also. So you need to understand that very clearly. So these are basically the 7 guiding principles for an agile BA. And just for understanding purposes, we have divided it into 2 different ways. So in your discovery framework, so probably when you are interacting more with your stakeholders, business stakeholders, product owners, you probably would apply these 3 to understand the you see the whole picture, to understand your business domain. You think as a customer to understand who your end users are, what they want, and you determine what is valuable, what value adds probably the end users would actually want in the product. And in the delivery phase, when you're basically working with the team, you try to get real using examples, you explain them the features using real life examples, you understand what is doable, what the team is capable of. And of course, you're looking for complete in always continuous improvement and collaboration with stakeholders, with your team as well. And eventually you're avoiding waste, to understand anything which you think is nothing but a waste of time. So these are something which can be divided amongst 2 different groups or 2 different frameworks. But again, this is not hard and fast rule. You can keep switching one another, so that's okay. But the 7 principles are something which are very important to follow.
Sorry, I have a question here.
Yes, please.
Can you please help me understand what is waste? Because someone asked me once that how do you handle waste? So I really don't know, like, what is waste and how do we handle it? Can you please help me explain that?
So waste is something which is not giving any value add for the team, right? So any unproductive or any work or any process that your team is probably doing which doesn't have a value, which is not helping the team to to perform in your project or the product that you're building, is a waste. So one example which I just gave you is probably you're writing documents of requirements. So I have seen some organizations, people do write probably 2-3 pages of detailed requirement for a user story, right? So you've written that, that's very good, people have understood, your team has understood. But since we are saying agile, so agile, of course, your requirements will keep changing. Now when I give a sprint demo, my product owner might want me to change something, they might want me to, they might give me a feedback wherein I have to modify the requirement, because agile clearly says, and of course as the name suggests, you have to adapt to changes. Now actually it becomes very painful to of course you probably are making one more requirement document as a change request for that. So eventually these are not only wasting a lot of time, because you're creating those documents, instead of probably updating those documents, you could have actually finished that in a day or two. So that would have been helpful for the team member as well. And also in many cases people forget to update the documents also, so it just lying down in your document repository and no one is actually going and updating them. So in a very agile sense, a very good example of avoiding waste is avoid documentation. That's what they say. Now similarly, you need to find out in your team what is actually the waste material, or what is actually the waste process which is redundant, which you are following just for the sake of following as a process, but it is redundant, it doesn't give any value add in any aspect, is what you need to identify. But waste if you've been asked this in an interview, probably they were meaning the documentation is what it is.
So I was asked, how will you handle waste in the delivery phase? And I had no clue what does that mean.
Yes, so it's basically like in the delivery phase, you don't want your developers to basically sit and document things, document change requests, document things, because Agile does, the Agile manifesto, if you have gone through, that clearly states that it is like, you're building a software, a working software over comprehensive documentation. That is the one line that Agile manifesto talks about. So instead of writing pages of documents, I would prefer building a building a an incremental software for it. So that's how it is. So your answer probably could have been around the documentation part of it, because team members
All right.
themselves itself, you're probably writing technical documents, which are, of course, some of them are really important, huh? It's not that you just get rid of it, but you need to understand what is required at what stage. Now if you are doing a technical document, after 3-4 months, please keep in mind that you come back and update it also if there is any change in the architecture.
Sit down. Sit down. Sit down, man. Coach you.
Pardon?
Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Fine,
Thanks
fine.
a lot.
Great. Fine. So the next part here, I'll just quickly go through, is again the traditional approach and the agile approach. I think, can somebody please go on mute? Yeah, not sure who it. Yeah, fine. So in traditional approach, if you see, right? So if we just calculate, like if we just consider that we have features as a quadrant, time and cost, so these are different quadrants. So my feature is fixed, right, in a traditional way, right? So I know I have to deliver this list of features, there's no other way. Time is also fixed, because probably I have 3-4 months of time, or even 6 months of time if I'm following waterfall. So within these 6 months I have to deliver the complete project. Cost is fixed, because usually in waterfall we used to do a fixed bid project. Of course time and material does exist, but usually cost is fixed. So the only way to play around or to change things, or the thing that will get impacted is the quality, because I have lot of features, I have a very fixed time constraint, I have cost constraint. So the only thing that will get impacted in the delivery is going to be quality, because there's no other way. Otherwise, how will you survive? It's like a typical human tendency, right? So you tend to finish work fast towards the end, that okay, since I'm reaching the deadline, let me do it now, later on I'll try to make a better approach in terms of technical thing. So that's how uh, the mindset of people has been. Now, when I talk about agile, my time is fixed. I know my sprints are of 2 weeks. Probably my cost is also fixed, and I am also keeping my quality also fixed. So what I'm playing around is the features. So if I have opted for 5 user stories in a 2 weeks of time frame, and I am not compromising with the quality, and the worst case, I'm not able to finish 5 user stories in 2 weeks. Maybe one of them is not completed, which is absolutely fine. I put that to the next sprint, but I do not compromise with the quality. Whatever the best coding practices are, I follow those. I'm following the automation of the unit testing, whatever is needed these days. So I follow everything. I do not compromise with that. I completely play around with my feature list. So that is the only or the main advantage that agile has, and that is absolutely okay in agile approach. And then you probably need to communicate it to your stakeholders, and since they are also quite close to the development, right, since we are having the daily scrum always, so they also know what changes are happening, and they are very transparent with the work that's going on, so it's usually okay with them, unless it's a worst case scenario. So features is something which is variable in agile approach, unlike in traditional approach. So these are a list of certifications in agile. If you really want to get yourself certified, you can opt for these. These days the IIB AAC certification is a very good one. It is a little advanced agile, so like if you're doing it, I would suggest that if you have worked on agile projects before, you can go ahead and do it. That should be helpful. But the CABA is also good enough. And Tech Canvas have launched the 6-week course, wherein people who are from non-agile background also can do this agile analysis certification. So 4 weeks we will train you for the AAC IIB agile analysis certification, and the first 2 weeks we give you an idea about what agile is, and we just go through some basic concepts. So that's how the planning has been. Yes.
So anyone, like for me myself, I am new to business analysis and I have never worked in IT before. So can
Okay.
someone like me also enroll for this course? And do you think someone like me can also get like clear the certification?
Yes, I think you can. It's a 6 weeks course, so you can enroll it and get it cleared, because it's mainly from a product aspect. And since you want to get into the business analyst role, I think one certification anyways will be important for you to, get into that work zone, or to get a job into it. So you can opt for it.
So do we have any mandatory hours that we have to complete before this certification, before enrollment? Like I have enrolled for ECBA and we have 21 or 24 hours of mandate work or
No, for,
training.
for
So do
this
we?
one, for this one, you do not have. You can actually go through.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Fine. I'll just quickly go through the list of questions that's there in the chat board. I'll just go one by one. I think the recording thing is answered by Soumya. YouTube channel is also being provided. Okay. Uh, is acceptance criteria optional in some cases? No, acceptance criteria you actually have to add, because it's the part of your user story. So one of the main elements of a user story is acceptance criteria. Okay. User story have to keep it simple and straight. Exactly, keep it precise. So again, just because it was just a very high level course, just session today, but the way we write user stories, right, it's always said that we follow the INVEST criteria. So INVEST, I stands for independent. Keep your user stories independent. V stands for viable. The way you write it, make it very simple and straight, like what you're trying to achieve from the user story. E is estimatable, so have enough detail so that the team members can estimate the stories, right? Like for how many, what is the estimation for that? I missed it. N is negotiable. So because it is agile, you always have to think that your requirements are not freezed. So you have to always keep that negotiation factor in mind. So that is N. Now invest is I guess S is small. Keep it small so that it can be completed within 2 weeks. And T is testable. So ensure that your acceptance criteria are clear enough so that it helps the testing team to test. So that is the principle of writing user stories. So when probably if we ever meet again and if we're doing a session on user stories itself, then we can do a deep dive on all these bits as well. Right, so it's a group of user stories is called an epic, and a group of epic is called an iteration. So a group of user stories, you're right, is called an epic. A group of epic is called as a theme. An iteration is basically the sprint that you are working on. So it's usually a 2-week sprint or a 4-week sprint. So the list of user stories that you are working within that 2 weeks is nothing but your iteration.
Hi, I had a question.
Yes.
So as per the new Scrum guide, it's related to the Scrum, the November 2020 Scrum guide. It says that none of these things like the burn down chart or a burn up chart or a technical debt or velocity is, they say that it is not a requirement, but it is one of the ways or things which can be used to help you if needed by if the project manager decides or the product owner decides. So is that the case, or do we but in real time scenario, I have never worked on Scrum. I'm taking the certifications and getting to it. So how does it actually happen in the real time scenario? Does it do you really need such tools, or it is just based on the people to decide?
So it's basically the way, the type of organization that you're working. So like I basically work for a product company, so for us we have that flexibility of not to look into the burn down, because it doesn't matter for us in that extent, because the product is our own. And the budget that we have, the money that we are investing, no one would actually come and question us. Of course we have management to answer. I'm not taking that way, but then we are still into our zone. We have our own product. But if you are mainly working for a service based company, like you have a customer or you have a client who has given you a project to work upon, in that case 90% cases I have seen people using these velocity and these various Scrum things like the burn down chart and everything, because it is required for them. These are nothing but sort of this burn down reports that you get. These actually help the higher management to understand how much has been completed, or the velocity helps you to do a proper resource management as well. So it depends on your organization mindset also. So it can be optional, but in most cases I have seen especially service companies following it very rigidly because of the other factors, because they do have resource constraints, they do have budget constraints, which of course the project managers or the delivery leads have to tackle in some way or the other. So that's how it is.
Oh, okay, thank you so much.
Okay, the next question is different levels as BAs with different responsibilities. Yes. But what's the question? Not sure. Fine. As per my knowledge, if user stories have some rules and regulations, then we have to write acceptance criteria defining the rules. If the user stories don't have any rules and not required to write acceptance criteria. But again, this depends on what your team is comfortable with. But if you go by what user stories are, and if you read any books on user stories, it always says that you should have, so the user stories, there is this 3C concepts. So that's how it actually started. So you have a card wherein you write down what your requirement is. So you probably write it in that format: as a user I want to do this so that I achieve this. And then you write down all the conversation. So a card, conversation, and confirmation. So these are the 3 C's of a user story. And when I talk about confirmation, these are nothing but the test criteria, the acceptance criteria, which are those confirmations. So usually typically in a in agile world or scrum world, a user story always has acceptance criteria, but then it depends, like if your team is okay, if they are quite confident that okay, they don't need it, then probably you need not do it, right? So yeah.
I have one more question. So,
Yes.
as per the new Scrum Guide again, it says that the acceptance criteria is actually not needed, but this is in the theory. But but by acceptance criteria, are we referring to the definition of done, or is it a separate? Because I understand it is acceptance criteria is basically some testing kind of thing, right? So that you know whether all the requirements have been fulfilled and is being delivered
Correct.
to the stakeholders. So is it similar to definition of done, or is it just another word used for definition of done? Because the new Scrum Guide says you don't need a acceptance criteria anymore.
Right. So acceptance criteria is basically about the requirement or the user story that you're writing about. Okay. And definition of done is something which is common, like definition of done is a checklist that is common to a team, and of course specific to a team and common for all user stories, wherein you would, for example, you would have a definition of done like, okay, is my code checked into the master, is the code being reviewed, is it being accepted by the product owner? So these are list of checklists for which probably you have to ensure that all the user stories are met before you tag them for any release. So definition of done is very different than acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria is mainly revolving around your features or your requirements, a specific feature, a specific requirement. But definition of done is sort of specific to a team, but is common for all the requirements. It's just a checklist to ensure that whatever is being released, the checklists are followed and everything is proper.
So acceptance criteria is not is followed just by an individual or just by a team, and DoD is for the entire sprint team or the Scrum team,
No,
like that.
DoD, you are right, is for the entire Scrum team. Acceptance criteria is feature specific or requirement specific. It's not team
Oh, okay.
specific. It is for the, suppose I'm writing a login screen. So
Mhm.
I'm writing a user story for the login screen. So I would want to have acceptance criteria of the error cases as well. So ensure that when I enter an incorrect password, I get to see this error message. Or probably another acceptance criteria could be that the password needs to contain 5 characters, 1 special character, etc. So these things gets into your acceptance criteria. So the example which I gave you, they are very specific to the login screen, right? They are not
Okay.
common to everything. So it's like
Mhm.
requirement specific.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Fine. Okay, another question. So I have a similar question to Shikha for the entrant. What is the best strategy, ECBA of Agile or this master course? You can see both of them are quite good. The AAC course is quite an elaborate one. So if you really want to get the Agile essence, uh, that will the AAC will definitely give you that, because it gives a very in-depth thing of Agile. So the focus is more into Agile, about the different horizons and how probably, how you basically build a product from the scratch, having that Agile mindset. So that is what it is. But again, it is up to you. ECBA is also, more from a BA perspective. Um, Agile analysis also is from a BA perspective, but it is quite in-depth and quite advanced, I would say. So you can just pick it up according to your, your requirement, how you want to move ahead in your career path. Fine. Any other questions? I think that's it. I have covered in the chat board, but anyone has any other questions? I guess that is it. Okay. Thank you all. And if you have any further questions, I think you guys can email to Tech Canvas in the email address. And, you can get information regarding the different courses.
Ipshita.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Can you hear
Thank
me?
you so much.
Yes, yes, I can. Go on.
Yeah, so again, related with this question like ECBA or this course. So like in the beginning, we don't have any knowledge or any idea where to go, how it will help. So in that case, what is a clear answer? Like, should we go for two, or should I go at a step like ECBA then and then this course?
Have you worked as a business analyst before?
No, never.
Okay. Okay. So see, you can do the ECBA first and then you can go for AAC. That you can do. But these days, since IIBA is very much in, if you talk from a resume perspective, the certification which will help you to get a job faster, that would be AAC in a one word answer, because IIBA is quite popular, and of course others also are, but the demand for AAC is more these days than ECBA. So that will help you to get a job, but probably you might have to put a little extra effort, because of course with this course you might also side by side just read through the typical ways of how to do business analysis and stuffs like that. If you're
To get
looking
the
from
more exposure, get more
yeah,
exposure.
correct.
I see.
If you're looking from a job perspective, just have some knowledge or just read through some stuffs of different ways and then do AAC course, because Agile is the new thing, not only new, it's already in the market. So yeah, Agile is everywhere. So that will help you to get a job quicker.
And thanks. And one more question: is it like the same kind of market in India as well as in North America? For the
Yes,
BA?
agile is these days prominent all over the world, Australia, America, everywhere. If you see, it is very much prominent, and of course your domain can be different from one country to another, but agile, the concept and the culture is same, because I do take these AAC courses, and most of the batches that I do are the US and the UK batches. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate. Thanks.
I have a question, sorry.
Yeah, tell me.
Um, in the course, like the agile course, do we have like, do we work on any projects also, or is it just theoretical?
It is theoretical in the sense, like, it will help, like we don't have projects as such, because it's all about concepts, but we do have a lot of sample questions which will help you to clear the exams. So we have a lot of quizzes, we have a lot of puzzles to clear your basic understanding and your basic concepts, but our main focus towards the end of the course is going to be for you to to get you prepared well, so that you are able to clear the exam. The
Okay.
focus is exam oriented. Yeah.
And how much is the certification? Do you know by any chance? How much is the
uh,
certification?
I am really sorry, I don't have, because I am just a
Okay.
but I'll give you a number. I'll just ping a number here, just a
That's all right.
moment.
I didn't go to the IIBA website. The only thing is because I have enrolled for ECBA through Tech
Okay,
Canvas, and
okay, fine.
that
You're
they
asking the IIBA enrollment. I think that is $250. I thought you're asking
okay.
the Tech Canvas rates, because
No,
I don't
no,
know
no,
the Tech Canvas rate.
the IIBA enrollment,
Yeah, it
because
is
in
250. And if you're
okay,
if you're a member, if you're an IIBA member, it is 250, and if you're a non-member, it's 350 approx, I think.
okay, all right, okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Ipshita.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.